All right. Kwam Yasharala, rise to the nation of Israel, so to Native Americans, and greetings and shalom to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad in the four corners of the earth. Welcome to another Sabbath class with Sons of Isaac. And of course, I'm your teacher, Karash Allah. And, tonight's lesson, we're going to finish up the history of Purim. We're going to go into part two. So we had did, part one, which I believe was Wednesday. So we're going to get it on the second day. But since we're in the Sabbath, and of course, we usually go into the Old Testament on anyway, we'll finish up, you know, the history of Esther. All right. So of course, this is Purim is a very very important part of our history because it celebrates and commemorates the great deliverance of our nation, or one of the great deliverances of our nation, man, by the hands of our heavenly Father. All right. And there are many great deliverances that the Lord has given the nation, delivering us from the oppressive hands of our enemies, right? But it's something, man, about the just the history of Esther, and just the way we were delivered. It's just, how can I put it, you know uh something, just it's just something very very special. So we're going to pick it up in chapter 6, and we're going to read verse 1. All right. So of course we know that when we left off in part 1 of the history of Purim, we went into we went into um we went into the opening part of the history. We talked a little bit about King Ahasuerus, who he was, which was Xerxes the first, in the Josephus and Artaxerxes. So we also, talked about Mordecai. I'm showing how Mordecai was a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin. So, he was a part of the southern kingdom. He was carried away during the captivity of Jeconiah. So he was a part of that carrying away. Um, um, yeah, and we talked about how the two doormen, who were watching over the king's room, right? They had a plot to kill, King Ahasuerus, and Mordecai caught wind of it, and he told, Esther, and Esther relayed that message back to the king himself. All right. And, the plan was foiled and those two men were executed. Well, so we know, man, we went into a little bit about Haman, right? And his background, who he was and how he was a descendant of, the Amalekites, right? So he was of the seed of Agagite, right? Which was of the royal seed, okay, of Amalek. And, we had went into a little bit of his history as well. So we're going to pick it up here in chapter 6 and, verse 1, and we're going to continue on. All right. So now here, this is Mordecai finally gets, he gets exalted. Okay. So now let's read this in chapter 6 and verse 1. So Haman, he's still very very much he very very much Mordecai, and he still wants all of the Jews to be exterminated. All right. So in this second part, we're going to be going into how you know the Lord actually delivers his people. All right, from so great of a death. So it says, on that night could not, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. Was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigtha, and Teresh, two of the king's, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor and dignity had Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servant that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. So now you see this, you see this? So just to pause for a second. Now you see how this just all of a sudden just came upon the mind of King Ahasuerus. right? When he was laying down, he's like, man, bring me my book of records, you know. He's remembering, he's recalling the whole situation. So this is the Most High, man, having King Ahasuerus recall this situation, and the two men that were trying to kill him, and the one who actually, who actually plot. All right. Out in the book of records, I was the one who told on, the two men that were trying to kill him. All right. And you on that these two men worked for Haman. All right. Is and verse 3. And King Ahasuerus said, what honor and dignity has been done to Mordecai? Then said the king's servant that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. And the king said, who is? And now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. So remember in the previous chapter, I believe chapter 5, man, he had built a gallows, right? And he wanted it about 50 cubits high, right? Which was like about 75 feet tall. Okay. When you do the calculation, so it was about 75 feet tall, man. So, man, to hang the body of Mordecai where everybody could see, right? But you got to understand about the full this man plan, right? So, and you're going to see something else, man, that's contained within our law. So I'm gonna bring that out once the fight forth. So it says, now it says in verse 5, and the king said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to what would the king delight to do honor more than himself? To whom would like to do honor, the king delight to do honor more than himself. So he's like, who does the king want to do more for, man, than me? Well, let's read. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighted to honor. Let the royal apparel be brought which the king uses to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. Right. So this is what the king wanted, Haman to do. Right. So now let's find out what he did. And let this apparel and this horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man wherewithal whom the king delighteth to honor, and to bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Right. Then the king said to Haman, right? So remember, Haman was who? The visor to the king, to King Ahasuerus. So he was like second in command. That's when he got promoted. Remember, make haste and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew. Now look at that. He said, do so more to Mordecai the Jew. Now just think about how Haman felt at that point when he said that. You got to think about it, man. This man's heart probably just dropped, his throat all the way down to his feet when he heard that name, right? That sitteth at the king's gate, let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the streets of the city, and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor. Look at that. And it said, Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hastened to the house mourning and having his head covered. So he was ashamed about what he just did, right? Ashamed, because the very man that he hated, right, he had to parade him around the city and proclaim that this man is in honor of the king. So this devastated. Remember, it said that because bow, right? When we read in part 1, when Mordecai did not bow unto Haman or show him reverence, that angered Haman. He saw who to find out who this man was, right? He found out Mordecai was a Jew. You see that? And Haman searched his records and said, well, dang, This man's people was killing my folks, right? So you got to think about it, man, just how sick Haman was, all right? Just how angry he was and how upset he was, man. So then it says, and Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends, everything that hath befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh, his wife, unto him, if Mordecai be the seed of the Jews before whom thou hast been, look at that, thou shalt not prevail against him, but thou shalt surely fall before him. Look at that. You see how deep that is? From his wife, his wise men, and his wife, right, is telling him, like, look, man, if he be of the seed of the Jews, before whom you began to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him. So they're already saying, man, this man, if he's righteous, these are the seed of Jews. Everybody knows the history of the Jews, right? So real quick, I want to get this in the I want to definitely get this in the Apocrypha. All right. So for those who have the Apocrypha, let's go to the book of, let me see. What is it? The book of Judith, real quick. I want to get the book of Judith in the Apocrypha. And let me see. I want to get verse 5. So this is Judith in the Greek, King James. Let's get it in the King James. So the chapter 1, we're going to go to chapter 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So now this is a very important chapter, okay, that we find here in the book of Judith, chapter 5, because this is something that the nations, you know, all of the nations, man, that have come up against the children of Israel know, you know, the type of power that when we're in righteousness, right? Of course, this is Holofernes, right? So he's the general of Nebuchadnezzar's army. And then you have Achor, who was the captain of the sons of Ammon, and he's going to let, you know, Holofernes exactly the people that he's up against. All right. So I'm going to Judith chapter 5, and I'm going to start at verse 5. And it says, then said Achor, the captain of all the sons of Ammon, let my Lord now hear a word from the mouth of thy servant, and I will do the truth concerning this people, which dwelleth near and in hill countries, and there shall no lie come out of thy servant. This descendant of the Chaldeans, and they sojourn heretofore in Mesopotamia, because they the gods of their fathers, which were in the land of Chaldea. For they left the way of their ancestors and worshiped the God of heaven, to whom they knew. So they cast them out from the face of their gods, and they fled into Mesopotamia and sojourned there many. Then their God commanded them to depart from the place where they sojourned, and to go into the land of Canaan, where they dwell, and where they increased with gold and silver and very much cattle. But when a famine covered the land of Canaan, or Canaan, they went down into Egypt and sojourned there, were nourished, and became there a great multitude, so that one could not number their nation. The king of Egypt rose up against them and dealt subtly with them low with the laboring in bricks and made them slaves. Look at that. So you see that this is Achor. He's breaking down their history, all right? The history of our fathers from when Abraham left Mesopotamia or Chaldea, when he went into Mesopotamia, which is Haran or Syria, and then he came down and dwelt in the land of Canaan. So then going into the patriarch Jacob, then his 12 sons, and when they went down into Egypt, right, and when they became slaves in ancient Egypt. So now it says, then they cried unto their God, and he smote Egypt with plagues. So the Egyptians cast them out of their sight, and God dried up the Red Sea before them, and brought them to Mount Sinai and Kadesh Barnea, and cast forth all that dwelt in the wilderness. So they dwelt in the land of the Amorites, and they destroyed by their strength Esbon, and passing over Jordan, they possessed all the hill country. So them of Heshbon, right? So Ogag of Bashan, and then you have Sihon of Heshbon, right? So those are the nations. Those are the Hamitic nations, the Canaanites. And it says, and they cast forth all them, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Shechemites, and all the Girgashites, and they dwelt many days. And whilst they sinned not before their God, they prospered, because the God that hateth iniquity was with them. You see that? So when it says, whilst they sinned not before their God, they prospered, because the God that hateth iniquity was with them. So now you see why the wise men and Zerah the wife, when they heard that Mordecai was being exalted, stood that history, because that history nations knew and understood. Okay, yeah. Not to say that many of the nations weren't privy to the time period. All right, so that's why they had to go back into the records, man, and search up who these people were. That's why Haman had to let Ahasuerus know of the people, man, that was like scattered all across his, across his empire. All right, which had diverse laws from any other people that were across his empire. Okay, so now, Mordecai is prospering, because he's not transgressing the law of our fathers. Okay, and those nations, they understood that. So now let's continue to read. But when they departed from the way which he hath appointed them, they were destroyed in many battles, very sore, and were led captives into the land not theirs, and the temple of their God was cast to the ground, and their cities were enemies. But now are they returned to their God, and are come up from the places where they were scattered, Jerusalem, where it is, and are sealed in the hill country, for it was desolate. He says, now therefore, my Lord and Governor, if there be any error against this people, and they sin against their God, let us consider that ruin, and let us go up, and we shall overcome them. But if there be no iniquity in their nation, let my Lord now pass by, lest their Lord defend them, and their God be for them, and we become a reproach before all the world. He said we become a reproach for all the world, because that's what happened. All right. Many of the nations that fought against Israel, they became a reproach. All right. They became a part of our, all right, of nations that got defeated, conquered, even the proud became dead. All right. So that's what we got to understand, man. So the nations understood this history. This is very important. Okay. So this is in the Apocrypha. All right. And I'm using Bible Hub, for those who are watching online. This is an app called Bible Hub. You can also download it on your phone. It also it has the Apocrypha on there. Okay. So there are 80 books of the Bible altogether, all right, from the 66, and then you have the 14, additional books that are in Greek in the Apocrypha. Okay, hold on one second, guys. Here we go. So this is what Haman's wise men and his wife, had told him. Okay. So now it says, and while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hastened to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. So in chapter 5, Esther had asked King Ahasuerus if she could prepare a banquet, okay, for the king. All right. and she made it exclusive to where only the king and whoever else she invited were able to come. So Haman was invited. All right. So this was all a part of Esther's plan to expose the crooked man. All right. So let's go to the next chapter. So this is chapter 7 in Esther, and we'll start at verse 1. Okay. So we're gonna go through the entire chapter. We'll try to get the key points. Okay. So now it says, Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen, and the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition? So he asking Esther, what do you want? What do you want? And he says, and it shall be granted thee, and what is thy request? And it shall be performed even to half of the kingdom. So he's like, I'll give you whatever you want, even if it's half of the kingdom, tell me. So it says, then Esther the queen answered and said, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we have been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, who is he, and where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? So we asking her, who is this? Who is this? Where is he? And who is this that want to do this to you? And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. So Haman was exposed at this feast. All right. So Esther, she was pleading for her. Okay. Because this is what Mordecai had told Esther. All right. Real quick. And I want to go back. I want to backtrack a little bit. So I want to backtrack a little bit so that we can understand, what was told, what Mordecai had told Esther. Okay, hold on one second. Let me backtrack a little bit. Let's go. Let's hit chapter. Let's go to chapter 4. Let's go to chapter 4. Let's hold this in chapter 7. Guys, and let's go to chapter 4 real quick. Let's go to Esther chapter 4. So we're going to skip to chapter 4 in Esther. One second, guys. Chapter 4, and we're going to drop down and read verse 9. Okay. So we're going to drop down and read verse 9. So I just wanted to backtrack a little bit. So then it says here, so this was after the letter was sent out, and to destroy the Jews into all the provinces. All right. So it says in Hatach, after the words of Mordecai, again Esther spake unto Hatach and gave him the commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces do know that whatsoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to him to be put to death, except such to whom the king should hold on the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. So basically, Esther is telling Haddock, that she has not been called by the king, and that the only way that she can see the king is if but she hasn't been called for almost a month. So so then, let's read on and let's see what Mordecai say. And they told Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. So this is what Mordecai is letting her know. All right. He said, don't think that you're going to escape. What's about the more than any other Jew. All right. He says, for if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shalt thou enlargement and deliverance Jews from another place. You see that? So he told her, like, he's like, don't think that you're going to escape the fate of our people, right? More than any other Jew. He says that if you hold your peace at this time, then guess what? Enlargement and deliverance is going to another place. So basically he's letting them know, man. He's basically letting Esther, the position that you've been put in, right? Queen, you understand, of the Persian and Mede Empire, the Most High put you in that position for this very reason. And if you sit in that palace quiet and do nothing, then guess what? Deliverance is going to come from somewhere else. The Most High don't need you. So you see, he's checking her at the same time and letting her know, man, that yes, deliverance can come from somewhere else, but you've been put in a place to help your people. All right. So now he says, but thou and thy father's house shall, don't you understand that you and your father's house will be destroyed? And whoso knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Right? He said, how do you know that you ain't come to the kingdom in such a time as this? You think that you landed in this position by coincidence? So this is how Mordecai had to talk to Esther. All right. He said, so basically, she was afraid of the commandment, but he had to tell, he had to check her, man. And, understanding that Esther, you know what I'm saying? She basically, when you read the rest of it, she basically requested that everybody fast for 3 days. She needed that fasting, to strengthen herself and to cry to the Most High, man, so that, she can receive strength from him. All right. Perish, man, for what she's about to do. And that's, that was go before the king. That's when you read chapters 5, you know what I'm saying? She does that. All right. She goes before the king, and then she faints, and then she lets the what's going on. She want to perform a banquet for him, so on and so forth, right? The king, did put her to death. He had mercy on her, and he had mercy on Esther, putting the scepter on her, and so on and so forth, right? So now let's go back to chapter 7, excuse me. So we'll take the shortcut. Take the shortcut. Now, going back to verse 5. So then it says, then answered and said, who is he that durst to do so? And Esther said, the adversary, and in Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. So Haman was in fear now. And the king arose from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. So the king angry. All right. So he's like, what's going on? Angry, right? And Haman stood up to make to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. So the king was so pissed off that he was ready to. He was like, man. And you see, he saw this, and he was in fear for his life. So he's basically begging the queen. He's begging Queen Esther, for his life. All right, because he knows what the king is about to do. Deceive the king. All right. He basically deceived Ahasuerus into signing this bill and so on and so forth. Because remember, the position that Ahasuerus in, man, 127 provinces, then, he ruling his empire, and then there are wars, rebellions going on. So he has a lot of, so his advisor is trusted to handle certain things, right? But he didn't know that his wife was a Jew. But this is why Mordecai said that, he told Esther to conceal her identity as a Jew. Not let are a Jew, all right, or an Israelite, okay. This for the main purpose, and you see how began to set everything up, all right. So it's then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the wine of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed thereon. Esther. So now you see that he's like basically he's on, he's sitting there. He was like, he pleading, like I said, he's pleading for, for his life, right, to Esther. So it says, then said the king, will he force the queen also before me? So basically, he was on top of her, begging for his life. Like, you gotta save me, please. You see that? He's begging an Israelite for his life. All right. So you see that this white man, okay, this white man is begging for his life. Ahasuerus sees this and he's like, will he also try to rape the queen before me in the house? So then he says, as the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. So they put that bag, they put a bag, they put a what you call it, a sack over Haman's head, right? Just like you see when you don't know where you're going, they put a sack over your head, So they put a sack over Haman's head, and it says, in Hardbon, one of the chambers of the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, whom had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. So the king was like, hang his ass on that same gallows, right? So now you see what happened. So now remember, in our law, it says that whatever evil you determine to do upon the person, then that same evil is going to come upon you, right? Because remember, if somebody's innocent, if a man, and then somebody sits there and wants to do evil to a man, right? And the man is innocent, then guess what? The Most High can flip that right back on you. All right. And that's found in the book of Deuteronomy, I believe. Hold on one second. Let me see. It's in Deuteronomy. Yeah, here we go. Deuteronomy chapter 19. And let me read this. Okay. And it says, and though I'm gonna start at verse 18. Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 18. I'm gonna read from my Bible. Judges shall make diligent inquisition. Oh, if the witness be and hath testified falsely against his brother, then shall he do unto him as he hath thought to have done unto his brother. So shalt thou put the evil away from among you. You see that? So you see that? So the evil that false witness tried to do unto his brother is going to come upon him. All right. So that brothers will think twice, man, about lying and falsifying things, man. So what happened to Haman, right? It was in his heart that he wanted to kill Mordecai. You see that? And Mordecai had done nothing to him. All right. He just did not bow down to Haman as he wanted him to. You see that? So remember, we already went into the mind of Mordecai, right? When we went into the book of Esther, text of Esther, all right, in the Apocrypha. And it was read, all right, and it was read in that text that he was like he didn't bow down to Haman because of pride or contention or anything like that, but he said he wanted to let them know, man, that there's only one God, there's only one being that he's bowing down to, and that is the Most High. That's it. All right. So let's continue. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath. So now the king, he was happy at that point in time, right? He was cool. He was like, he tried to sit there. He was trying to rape my wife. Guess what? You know what I mean? He had to die. All right. He was trying to, he basically, like I said, he deceived the king. Go to chapter 8. Let's see what else is going on. So now, on that day, did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto queen, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had what he was unto her. So basically, Queen Esther had told Ahasuerus that she said Mordecai is my uncle. All right, he's basically my uncle. So remember, it said in the I believe in chapter 2 that Mordecai, treated Esther as his daughter. So he raised Esther. All right. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. You see that? So now all of the house of Haman, right? All of his servants, everything that Haman had You see how powerful the Most High is? Now you see that Mordecai became the visor to the king Ahasuerus. So it went from an Edomite to an Israelite. All right. From an Agagite to being the second in command. All right. So we already know that there were notable men, before Mordecai, man, that we can mention, like, like Joseph, right, who was who was the second in command in all of Egypt, the Egyptian empire. He controlled it. You see that? The only one that was greater than Joseph was the king himself. So we see that always comes into play, man. When you're doing righteousness and you're doing what you have to do, you standing up for the Most High. Guess what? He's going to put you in positions he's going to put you in positions to benefit his people. All right. And this is what our nation is missing today, man. We do have Israelites that are in offices, in the United States government, but yet are they benefiting our nation? Absolutely not. Why? Because the government that's in this society is heavily satanic. All right. And it is not benefiting anything for us. All right. Okay. So now we have to begin to build for ourselves. All right. So now it says, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And again before the king and feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king and said, if it please the king, and if I have found favor, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be reversed the letter devised by Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, with to destroy the Jews which were in all the king's province. For how can I endure to see this evil, the evil that my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews as it liketh you in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring, for the writing which is written in the king's name and seal with the king's ring may no man reverse. You see that? Mordecai has to write a letter, right, to all of the Jews in every province, right? And with Mordecai's ring, once it has been sealed or given that stamp, remember that's the king, all right? That's the king's signature. So it says, then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, on the 3rd and 20th day thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and to the deputies, and the rulers of the provinces, which were from India unto Ethiopia, 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and to after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing, and according to their language. All right. And he wrote in the King Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, stand for their life, to destroy and slay and cause to perish all the power of the people and the province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and take the spoil of them for a prey. Look at that. So the letter that he wrote to his brethren, right? He said, anybody that come against you, destroy them and take spoil from them. All right. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 30th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Dar, the copy of the writing of the commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that be ready against the day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the posts that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressured on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai from the presence of the king in the royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. Right? So many of the people, right, many of the other nations, man, the Jews were dwelling amongst, they began to convert to the laws and the commandments of the Jews. All right, they did not become Jews themselves, they converted to the law. So they were converts, proselytes. All right, so let's go to the last chapter, chapter 9. Okay, so now it says, and now in the 12th month, that is the month of Dar, on the 13th day of the same, which the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemy of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary. The Jews had rule over them that hated them. So the Jews had the upper hand, all right, against those that hated them, all right. So remember, there was no destruction of Nicanor just yet, all right. So this was before the destruction of Nicanor. Nicanor came much later, all right, throughout in the Greek captivity of the Israelites. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the Ahasuerus to lay hands on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. Look at that. So no man could withstand the Jews. Okay. And all the rulers of the lieutenants and the deputies and the officers of the king helped, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. Look at that. So check that out. So they seen the magnificence of Mordecai and the power that this man was, the power that the position this man was placed in. Okay. So they seen Haman's plot was foiled. All right. And the Jews prevailed. And it says, for Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Look at that. So this man, just when he was put in this position, it's like he excelled even more. All right. In certain positions, we know that there's only so much that we can do. But when we're put in a position to where we can just really show our skill, our talent, our intellect, and our genius, man, we become greater and greater. You see that? So it says, thus the Jews smote all the enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughtered and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men, and Pesharatha, and Delphon, and Aspatha, and Poratha, and Aldalah, and Edratha, and Pashmatha, and Ezrai, and Aridai, and Basjajetha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil they laid not their hands. Look at that. On that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. So the ones that they killed that before Haman, they were about killing the Jews. Guess what? They brought those bodies before the king. King said unto the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan, the palace. Right? So look at that. Those were men that were working inside the palace. All right. And the 10 sons of Haman, what have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee, or what is thy request further? And it shall be done. So he even asked her even further. He was like, so what else do you want? What else do you need? And I'm going to grant it for you. All right. So he was like, your enemies are laid before you. You know what I mean? Those that sought your life, they're dead. You see that? So now you see now you see what we had read earlier, right in chapter 4 about what Mordecai has said, man. Don't think that you'll be able to escape more than any other Jew. All right. So she was appointed, man, to be put in that position to what? To save her people. All right. So Mordecai and Esther were held in great honor. You see that? So Esther was already the queen. We went into the mind of Esther, on the first night, and we saw how she just abhorred the crown and, you know what I'm saying, being in the bed of the uncircumcised. So she didn't take pleasure in the man that she was with. All right, because nationality or her people. All right. So now it says, then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and his sons be hanged upon the gallows. Look at that. So she was like, I want the sons hanged. I want his sons hanged. Right? And there's a reason for that. Everybody know the reason for that, right? You see what I'm saying? Guess what? Yes. The sons will try to avenge their father. Look at that. That's why you had to destroy the seed. Look what happened with Saul, the first king of Israel. What he didn't do, seed of Agag, right? So a remnant of them were able to escape, as we see. And guess what? Came back to haunt us. You see what I'm saying? Years later, it's still haunted. His decision, his choice haunts us to this very, very day. You see that? Because Amalekite. All right. So now it says, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. All right. So Haman, he was basically, when you read it in the Apocrypha, he was trying to bring the throne of the Persians. All right. So Haman himself was basically a Macedonian spy. So he was basically a part of that Alexander and all of them, Alexander the Greek. Okay. So even though the Persians ended up losing control of the empire to the Greeks, you know what I mean, which was inevitable. They tried to make it happen early. So now it says, and the king commanded it so to be done, and the decree was given as Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves 14th day also of the month of Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan, but on the prey they laid not their hands. Look at that. But another 300 men. You see that? He says, but the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, rest from their enemies, and they slew of their foes 70 and 5,000. So they killed 75,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey. Look at that. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day, the same rested they, and made it a day of. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day thereof, and on the 15th day of the same they rested, and made a in gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and sending portions one to another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day the same yearly. So they decreed that this would be a feast day for us to keep. It says, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies in the month which they turned unto them from sorrow to joy and from mourning to, that they should make them days of feasting and joy and sending portions one to another and gifts to the poor, right? So they sent each other gifts, okay? So it says, and the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman, the son of Agag, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had put Pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they raised Purim after the name of Pur. Therefore all the words of this letter and of the scene concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon all themselves unto them, so that it should not fail. So all of the Jews, you know what I'm saying, the children after them, and also those that were converts, they would keep this appointed feast. All right. And they will keep these 2 days to their writing according to the appointed time every year. And these days kept throughout their generation, every province, every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor of them perish from their seed. So it shows you just how we have these days even in our generation now. All right, because the seed of the Jew is still here. All right, the real Israelite. It says, and Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. And he sent the letter Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus with words of to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they decreed for them and for their seed the matters of the fasting and their cry. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. So it was written in our book. You see that? This is why we still have the knowledge of very day. All right. So I hope everybody got some good understanding, man, on the Feast of Purim. You know, this, like I said, man, you know, it was a time of celebration, joy, and gladness for us because we were delivered from a great death. All right, that was to come upon us. So you had men that were hidden, and when those armies came out to try to destroy us, guess what? We were able to defend ourselves and put our enemies, you know what I'm saying, to death. Praises to the Most High Power, the God of Israel, you know, and just giving honor and praise, man, unto Him forever and ever, man, for being there to, you know, to deliver us from. All right. So, you know, Kwame Yasharala, Israel, man, you know, and of course, you know, definitely check us out once again, you know, for another Sabbath service tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be breaking down Romans chapter 11. And, you know, with that, we say shalom to the 12 tribes of Israel.